Welcome back to Two Pretty Good Bad Men, an Alias Smith & Jones podcast. I'm your host Tabitha, and we are painfully making our way through these separation episodes. Today we'll be covering episode 7, Return to Devil's Hole, and a title that certainly sounds exciting, but makes it all more crushing once you actually watch it. The episode was shot in mid-January of 1971 and aired on February 25th, 1971. The story was once again by Roy Huggins, and the teleplay was by Knut, that's K-N-U-T, Swenson. It was directed by Bruce Kessler. Our writer Knut Swenson's real name is Marion Hargrove. Once he saw the final product, Hargrove was unhappy with it, something he and I have in common, and wanted his name taken off of it. Before writing for the screen, he was a novelist. His books See Here, Private Hargrove, and The Girl He Left Behind were both adapted into movies. See Here, Private Hargrove was evidently massively popular. I've never heard of it, but it seems like something I should mention. He began writing scripts for film and television in the 1950s. Unsurprisingly, he wrote several episodes of Maverick. He wrote the screenplay for The Music Man, that's kinda cool. He did 5 episodes of The Walton, and he wrote for other James Garner vehicles like Nichols, Brett Maverick, and the movie Cash McCall. He created one short-lived television series called The Rounders about 2 down-on-their-luck cowboys in debt to a very wealthy man and must do his bidding. It sounds a bit like ASJ, but I haven't seen it, so I can't say for certain. This series was based on a movie of the same name. This is his only ASJ credit. Our director Bruce Kessler was a very prolific TV writer. You guys, he directed 4 episodes of The Monkees. Bless him. He did 5 of To Catch a Thief, because apparently every working person in Hollywood back then worked on To Catch a Thief, and I'm just the idiot who didn't know about it. He did episodes of Adam 12, Marcus Welby MD, Get Christy Love, Beretta, and McCloud. In the 80s, he worked on The A-Team, Greatest American Hero, Riptide, Hardcastle and McCormick, and The Fall Guy. In the 90s, he worked on The Commish, Touched by an Angel, Renegade, and the greatest series ever, Baywatch Nights. This is also his only ASJ credit. We have 3 main guest stars this week. Fernando Lamas as Big Jim Santana. He would go on to direct 2 episodes of our show. He also directed 3 episodes of Starsky and Hutch, my ride or die show, including Shootout, which is just one of the best episodes. He also directed for SWAT and The Rookies. He directed and starred in the Spanish movie Magic Fountain with his wife Esther Williams. You might know her as America's Mermaid, because she made all those movies with the underwater choreography and was amazing at it. She was married to Lamas until his death in 1982. His last credit directing was for the series House Calls with Wayne Rogers. As an actor, Lamas starred in a lot of films from his home country, Argentina, before getting a deal with MGM and acting in movies for them. After making Magic Fountain, he mostly stuck to television, guest starring on It Takes a Thief, there it is again, Mission Impossible, The Mod Squad, and The Love Boat. And apparently he had a Latin lover rivalry with Ricardo Montalban. Next is Diana Hyland as Clara Phillips. If you've heard a story about her, it would probably be the one where she was John Travolta's first love, despite being about 20 years older than him. She starred in the TV movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble with him as his mother. A little weird, but okay, it happens. Looking through her IMDb page, she guest starred in just about everything. She did 59 episodes of Peyton Place, and sadly, she died very young, in her early 40s, of breast cancer. Her last role was as the mother on 8 is Enough, but she passed away after only filming 4 episodes. She died in John Travolta's arms. She was awarded a posthumous Emmy for The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, and Travolta accepted it on her behalf. I am sorry that her life was cut so short. Our third main guest star of this episode is Brett Halsey as Matt Hamilton, and you guys, he was in The Godfather Part 3. Sure, that's the one that no one likes, but still, Godfather's in the title, isn't it? He was in the short-lived series Follow the Sun about magazine writers in Hawaii. He was on Heart to Heart, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and Dukes of Hazzard. He provided the voice for Dr. Bolivar Trask on X-Men the Animated Series, and he will pop up on ASJ again in Season 3 as a different character. We also have some returning members of the Devil's Hole gang. Dennis Stimple is back as Kyle, Sid Haig is back, and he gets a name this time. It's Merkel. And Bill McKinney is Lobo. This episode is another remake of a Virginian episode called Vengeance is the Spur. But that episode is credited to a different writer, so I guess they worked a little harder to change it to an ASJ episode. Oh, that was a lot. I didn't realize these actors would have such interesting backstories. Now let's get on to the episode. We start with a sneak peek, as usual. Hayes is yelling at some guy who's yelling at him, and then a woman chimes in that Hayes is innocent and she's sorry, but she'd do it again. Intrigued? Me neither. After the opening credits, we get this slightly different version of the theme song, and I'm kind of into it. The woman from the sneak peek, Clara Phillips, rides into town looking for Joshua Smith. So she got his alias from somewhere. She's got an entire garden on her hat as well. Tone it down. The hotel clerk said that he and his friend checked out and left town, heading west. So she takes off again. I am not sure what the point of that was, other than to eat up some time. You guys, The Virginian was a 90-minute show. Surely you had enough material without having to just pad it out with pointless scenes. So she takes off again. Anyway, at the next hotel, she claims that Mr. Smith is her brother, but blows that pretty much immediately by asking the guy what he looks like, because it's been a while since she's seen him. Lucky for her, Hayes is in that town, and he agrees to meet with her because she'll give him $100 just to do so. Once he's up in her hotel room, she tells him that she knows who he really is and convinces him to drop the Smith act by telling him that she knows Lom Travers. And to this, he pulls his gun on her. Hayes! On a lady? He gives her room a search, but she assures him that she's not interested in the reward on his head. She claims she wants him to save her husband's life. Her husband is hiding out in Devil's Hole, and she can't get there on her own. She needs him to get her in. I can't believe that Lom would just give away his alias and location like that. What a douche. Hayes isn't super into this idea, but she waves a stack of cash in front of his face, and then he's putty in her hands. The next day, as he's preparing to leave, he's arguing with Kid about it. Kid thinks it's a bad and dangerous idea, but Hayes insists that they need the money. Kid says that he's the only thing that's been keeping Hayes alive all these years, and he wants to go along with them. But Colonel Harper, the man who hired them for the girl in boxcar number 3 job, is supposed to meet them in that town for another job, so one of them has to stay. That's a point for continuity. Hayes hands him over the money from Clara to hold on to. It's actually a really nice moment, and you can read on their faces that it's Hayes' way of saying, "You're gonna need this if I don't come back." And Kid is reluctant to take it, but he does so at Hayes' insistence. I really like it, but it would hold more weight if they hadn't gone out of their way to establish multiple times that the Devil's Hole gang are not killers. They're not gonna kill Hayes. They're just not. Like, even if you weren't the main character, I would not be worried about these people committing murder. Hayes rides off with Clara, and jarringly a ballad starts playing. It's called Take a Look Around. It's not a period song, it's from the 70s, and this show never, ever uses needle drops like this. Not only is it out of place for the show, but the song is obnoxious too. I don't get it. Just use some of the stock music you have. The pair make small talk on their way, and there is some pretty scenery, I'll give it that. She asks him why he became an outlaw, and he says that as long as this trip is, he still wouldn't have time to explain it. They arrive, and Hayes fires his gun in the air. And we see Kyle, sweet dummy that he is. Hayes is making the place sound super dangerous again, but I'm sorry, it's not. It's really not. It's populated by Kyles, for goodness sake. Claire even asked if he's being just a little dramatic, and yes, the answer is yes, he is. The gang, which seems to have grown exponentially since last time we saw them, sees that it's Hayes and lets him through. Kyle's actually happy to see him, but he's even happier to see a woman. Kyle tells Hayes that Wheat's not around. He doesn't say where he is or why he left, but Wheat does come back, and he's in charge of the gang for the rest of this series, so I don't know, I guess they had a little tiff or something. For now, Big Jim Santana is in charge. He was the leader of the gang before Hayes was, and he spent the last several years in prison. They come up to meet Big Jim, and he's actually also very happy to see Hayes. And apparently it's a rule that women aren't allowed at Devil's Hole. So, what goes on up there, boys? You can tell me. It's okay. Big Jim and Hayes meet in his cabin alone, and Jim punches him for not letting him know he was coming. And Hayes quickly repays the favor. It's a guy thing, I guess. Neither one are mad about it. Hayes wants to get to business so he can bounce. Clara tells Jim and Hayes that the Bannerman Detective Agency tracked her husband there, so he must be there. Another win for continuity. And she describes her husband. Big Jim figures that it must be a man named Matt Hamilton and gets Kyle to fetch him. Hamilton tells Kyle that he doesn't even have a wife, but he's unconcerned and he wants to check out what's going on anyway. Jim and Hayes discuss Hayes getting out of the business, and Jim seems to have genuine affection for him. Hayes says that he simply progressed right out of the business. Big Jim says that being an outlaw is great, though. Before they can get much farther into the conversation, Hamilton comes into the room and Clara promptly shoots him. And now we're back at the sneak peek. While some of the gang members drag Hamilton off to the bunkhouse, Big Jim is pissed at Hayes, and Hayes is defending himself. She assures Big Jim that Hayes didn't know what she was planning, and then she changes her story about Hamilton. She says he is not her husband. In fact, he seduced her 17-year-old daughter and then abandoned her, leading the girl to die by suicide, and she wanted to kill him for that. Big Jim feels that if the story is true, he'll kill the guy himself. And Hayes maybe believes her, he's not sure yet. Hamilton isn't actually dead, and Big Jim wants his side of the story before making any final decisions. It's actually reasonable. That night, Hayes and Jim go to talk to him. Hamilton says that whole story she fed him was a lie. Clara doesn't have a daughter and never did, but he does know her. He was with her, got tired of her, and left town. After some threats from Jim, he also admits that he stole $25,000 worth of jewelry from her. Okay. That's a lot of money. Jim tells Hayes one of them is lying, and Hayes replies, "Oh, at least one." I like that exchange. So they've got two stories and are unsure which to believe. Jim asks if Clara has a photo of her daughter, and she says she does, but since Hayes told her not to bring anything with her, she left it at the hotel. Okay, I call bullshit. She snuck the gun in but didn't take the photo of the person she's claiming to avenge? No way. Jim has Hayes go back in town to get it. Over drinks, Jim and Hayes continue to debate the differences in their lifestyles. Big Jim thinks that the amnesty arrangement is dumb. He's not wrong, honestly. Hayes says that Big Jim is dumb for serving his prison sentence, being freed, and then going right back to being an outlaw. That he could have started over. That's also a fair point. But Hayes lecturing him about not learning a trade or something while in prison just makes him sound kind of like your parent yelling at you for disappointing them. And it's not like he's much better himself. Big Jim says he's going to pull a job at the Wells Fargo clearinghouse in Denver and asks Hayes if he's interested. He most definitely is not. This is a pretty good scene. The actors are pulling it off nicely. The next morning, Hayes leaves for town, and instead of following him like we should since it's his show, we stay at Devil's Hole with Big Jim and Clara. Why? Did they run so behind schedule that they had to shoot an entire episode without either guy? Side note, my biggest problem with most shows from this era is that they focus a lot on tertiary one-off characters instead of the people the show is supposedly about. I don't care about these characters that I'm never going to see again once the episode's over. Why on earth would I? If I want to see one 50-minute self-contained story, then I'll watch an anthology show. If that's what the writers are interested in, then write an anthology show. But stop taking attention away from the characters I'm here for! That's why I never got that deep into Bonanza, despite my love for Pernell Roberts. The show typically doesn't have that problem. In fact, this is the only episode that really does, but even once is enough to bug me. Hayes retrieves the photo, sort of, and you can see the kid if you don't blink during this 3-second scene. Back with Jim and Clara, they're fishing, and she asks Jim why he became an outlaw. She's just got her stock questions to ask, doesn't she? Unlike Hayes, he actually answers. He says his family was cheated out of their land when he was a child, and she asks him why he doesn't get out of the life now. What is this? What are we watching? An after-school special about saving Big Jim Santana's soul? He basically tells her he's too old to start over. Clara starts telling him about her late husband, and then she says something super creepy. That her husband was like a father to her. Ew. Girl, I don't know if they had therapy back then, but you need some. Even Big Jim seems to think that was a weird thing to say. Except then he says, I guess you bring out the father in me too. Ew! Stop this! Stop this at once! Clara catches a fish but freaks out because, a fish, and she's a girl. They end up rolling around on the ground and then start kissing. Just as Take a Look Around starts playing again. Aw, how romantic and tender. And did I mention I don't care about these people? I definitely don't care about their romance. Thankfully, Hayes comes back right before I die of boredom. He hands over the picture, and it's a picture of a man. Big Jim just says he doesn't get it. Well, pal, it means she's lying. She says that her story is true, she has a daughter, but the pictures of her are in San Francisco. It is pretty brazen of her to just keep lying like this. Jim's hurt now because she lied to him even though he made out with her. He goes out for target practice and Hayes is still hassling him about quitting the life. Big Jim says he has decided to give it up, but he has to pull the Wells Fargo job because he brought too many men in and promised them fortune. Hayes believes he can think of a plan to get him out of it. He goes to the bunkhouse and tells the boys he's talked Big Jim into leaving and that they'll both be heading out tomorrow. But Big Jim comes in and says that Hayes is wrong. He is not leaving, and he's ready to move out on the job tomorrow, and that Hayes and Clara will be leaving alone. This satisfies most of the guys, but one of them thinks the whole thing is a double cross. Big Jim tells Hayes that it was a ruse and he is gonna bow out. Hayes is overjoyed at this news. He's very invested in Big Jim for some reason. It would be nice if this episode had used this opportunity to explore Hayes' background a little more with the gang, what he was like as a leader, maybe what his relationship with Big Jim was like. They seem to care about each other, but the show is just not interested for whatever reason. You know, they could have made the whole episode a flashback and cast younger guys as Hayes and the kid right after they joined the gang or something. Or maybe Hayes is just living vicariously through Big Jim. Big Jim has his freedom, so long as he doesn't blow it, and it's a freedom that Hayes is striving for. Back in the bunkhouse, they decide to take Clara hostage so Big Jim will do as they say. And I am very disappointed at Kyle for going along with it. Sweet dum-dum, I thought you were better than that. Hayes waits for the gang to show up at their cabin, and then he, Big Jim, and Clara haul ass out of there. The rest of the gang chases them, but they make it past the point where the gang apparently can't follow them. Riveting. They get back to town, and the next morning Big Jim decides to go with Clara, so I guess it's happily ever after for them. But before that, Clara finally comes clean. Maybe, and tells one more story. There is no daughter. Hamilton was telling the truth about that. Hamilton was telling the truth about the whole thing. She fell in love with him, and he took off with her jewelry. She just keeps getting less and less sympathetic. I'm sorry your jewelry got stolen and the guy you love was just using you, but you don't really get to murder someone for that. Then she says she guesses that makes her a liar. You guess? You guess? There's no guessing, Clara. You're a liar. Big Jim doesn't care. He loves her. Sure hope those two kids make it. I definitely care about this, the greatest love story in all the Wild West. And hey, Kid is back. And they actually get paid for once. That's great. They say goodbye as Big Jim and Clara pull away on the stage. Then Kid says, I think we did better by Jim than we did by ourselves. What's this we business, Kid? You didn't do shit. Then Hayes says at least now they'll have a very powerful friend in San Francisco. Yeah, we're never seeing Big Jim or Clara again, so nope. End credits. And Take a Look Around plays for the third time. Please never do this again, show. So this episode is better than The Great Shell Game, but it's not as good as The Girl in Boxcar Number 3. I just think it's a wasted opportunity to dig into their background with the Devil's Hole Gang. What was the point of going back there if the story wasn't even going to be about them? Or at least about Hayes. He's mostly just there. All he does is try and convince Big Jim to quit being an outlaw, which Clara does too, and since Jim wants to get laid, he's probably listening more to her than he is to Hayes. This just doesn't even feel like an ASJ episode. Line of the episode goes to Hayes. When talking about the Devil's Hole Gang, he says, Jim, they're all good men. Well, they're all men anyway. It just made me laugh. And I guess the episode goes to Hayes, even though he doesn't do much, like I said, but he does more than Kid does, and he does get in a few good lines. Next time on Alias Smith and Jones, we finally get a break from the separation episodes when the boys are blamed for a robbery that they didn't commit. Research for this podcast comes mainly from the wonderful book Alias Smith and Jones, the story of two pretty good bad men. Thanks for listening.